Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller here with my co-host Kevin David Gridner. And before we dive in, we always recap our three guiding principles, which are these. First, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity, not to win arguments, but to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally, following where authenticity leads us. So pull up a chair, grab a drink. Let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, for all of our listeners, you just need to know that before we started this call, Kevin and I kicked off our conversation talking about how to monetize narcissism. Um,
Like we do. I mean,
right. Like, I mean, isn't that
how's the weather? How do you monetize narcissism?
exactly? Exactly. Uh, it's nice to have such ordinary conversations. So, Kevin, you've been posting a bunch of what I've found to be fairly intriguing, writing a lot of fairly intriguing content this week, and I would love to just kind of open up this conversation with a pretty wide open kind of what's on your mind kind of a question.
That's a dangerous place to start.
It is.
Who knows where it could go?
Warning, this is live. I mean,
Perfect. Oh man. Well, the first thing that really struck me, this is probably earlier this week, maybe Saturday or Sunday. But I was driving around doing errands and that kind of stuff, and I saw a few videos that were talking about the effect that things like story and prose, lyric, poems, that kind of stuff has on our neurology and what actually happens in our brains when we hear things like that. And I've really been curious about that for a very long time, especially around music. Like music can deliver a message that logical analysis, argument, debate cannot. And it has a way, I think, of subverting the ego, all the self-protective mechanisms. And so I was really fascinated by that. So I kind of started going down a rabbit hole of research and conversations about what that looks like. And I started to look at the plain and simple fact that Jesus chose to teach most often in parables, in stories. Why? And then I started to think like a lot of the Old Testament is written as a story, as a narrative. It's like why? And so I just had this question. I was starting to think like that it maybe it's one of the primary languages that God speaks is through story, through metaphor, through poem, through prose, through these things that subvert the ego and get directly into the spirit.
it's always possible to, it's very easy to argue with somebody's conclusions about an experience, but it's really difficult to argue with somebody's recount of their experience. You
Right.
you can maybe tell them that you experienced the information, the situation differently, or that other people experienced it differently, or that's that maybe there are parts of that that are a hallucination, but um there's also this interesting thread of thought that if union is the knowing and being known is fundamental to life, to our walk with God, then it stands to reason that that only happens experientially.
Right.
And the best language to describe, I mean, there's two types, two ways to embody experiences. One is to um, share it through story, and the other is to find I mean, it's basically some form of artistic performance to recreate it. Um, it's In my opinion, I mean, these are just kind of my thoughts spinning off of this, but in my opinion, it can be anything from, um, you know, walking through an art museum, or even, you might argue this is fairly capitalistic, but walking into an Apple store. Both are an artistic expression to create an experience, some kind of, something, and it's a story that, in some sense, you're walking into.
Right. Yeah, you're being invited into a story.
Yeah,
And that's isn't that what marketing is? Like Target has created this whole series of ads around this Santa Claus figure recently. And he doesn't look like the traditional Santa Claus. He's more like fit. He still has, the beard, shorter hair, gray, but like fit guy kind of thing. And they've created this narrative around Christmas because you can be invited into a story,
right,
a Christmas narrative you're telling. Okay. Or you could just state all the deals you have for Christmas.
right.
And I would assume on a marketing level, the former is way more persuasive than the latter. So we can even use story to manipulate, to divide. If you have
Yeah,
two people in a situation and there's been some sort of conflict, and one comes in and says, "This is how I saw it. This is how I experienced it." Okay. And the other says, "This is how I saw it and I experienced it." Okay. Well, the opportunity there is to integrate those two views, to get to know each other, their version of what happened. That's an opportunity. Or we could stand in our place and say, "That's not true," and defend our walls and attack each other. It's a horrible story. That story teaches a lesson. Curate your words, be very precise, make sure you tell a narrative that's going to be accepted. There's all this learning that happens in it, just like there's learning on the other side, where we do actually sit down, we do talk through things, we do actually come to see what the other was seeing and experiencing.
yeah. And that presupposes that there's a level of openness and honesty around the story.
Certainly, certainly.
Um, there, there's this. I didn't think about this until you started talking, but, um, it occurred to me sometime within this past year that it seems to me like story is one of those few elements that integrate linear and holistic thinking, or logical and emotional thought. Because for story to make sense, it necessitates a linear order and a linear progression. You have to
Mhm.
know that, I mean, this is the setup. You might not know why, but it's really important that you know this first. And then this happened, and that happened, and it continues down the way. But at the same time, story that doesn't tap into emotion and meaning and holistic thinking and invitation into pattern finding and other types of things surrounded to that isn't a good story.
Right. What does make a good story?
Well, for what purpose?
Mhm. Mhm. For union.
One of the things that immediately comes to mind is, we have these moments when one of our kids wants to tell me something, and they're telling me the story, and it's all just facts of what happened. And it's like, then this happened, then this happened, and that happened, and then the next thing. And I'm like, at the end, I'm like, that was really important to you to tell me that, but I have no idea why. Like,
Right. What purpose did that serve?
what purpose did that serve? And I think somewhere within the story, there's part of what gives story meaning in the purpose of union is that it articulates something about how events impacted us. What
Right. My
emotions?
personal
Good.
experience of it. This is how it impacted me. Because otherwise, it's just data points. They may be flawed data points, but it's the verbal, some representation of Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yes.
Not exciting at all.
No. The not
Not
for
not entertaining, not engaging. Just like, and some people absolutely love Excel spreadsheets. They're like masters at it, that kind of thing. Like I want to vomit when I see Excel opening up.
it's your punishment when I'm mad at you on a podcast. I just do a screen share of an Excel spreadsheet and
You're
give it to you.
right. You'll see me gag.
Yeah, exactly. Um, And I think you can drill down deeper into how it affected you. Like more specifically, what did it make you feel? What thoughts did you have? What did it lead you to believe? What conclusions did it lead you to? What questions did it leave in your mind? How what was it like in the moment? How did that follow you afterward? Or how did it not follow you afterward?
Right.
It's really a window into the inner workings of the inner world of a person. Can be a really powerful tool.
Right. Right. And so I know a lot of spiritual directors, counselors, therapists who say that the most important thing is to give somebody the space to tell a story and then to be curious about the story, to ask questions about it, not to prove or disprove, but for clarity's sake, to understand where they're coming from. Like, that's the most powerful thing. They've forsaken every other methodology which has been scientifically or statistically proven to provide these types of gains potentially. And they say, no, there's something more holistic here. There's something more powerful. There's a guy named Phil Stutz. He had a Netflix special a few years back. He's written a number of books. He was trained in the psychoanalytic model, and he at a certain point was like, this is not working. This does not make sense. And he has his whole logical framework based on his experience. And he's an older guy now. And he has spent years and years and years refining this method where he essentially talks in metaphor and analogy and story with his clients, with his patients. He does a lot of imagery work. He does a lot of uh, imagination, a lot of that kind of stuff, and a lot of pictures. Like, what this is the picture that I see, and he's what picture are you seeing in this? And he encourages them to get into their story in a very holistic way, and it's been really powerful by all accounts. And when I watched that Netflix special, and then I read his books, I was like, he's onto something here. He's not only tapping into a modality, he's tapping into the core of who we are as human beings.
Right.
Like within our framework, our Western society framework, it's essentially based on the concept of I think, therefore I am. the philosophy that says that your value, your being, your purpose, your existence is based on your ability to think, which is a really enlightenment idea. I can solve this problem with my intellect. Okay. But how has that turned out for us as a world, as a society? 20th century was supposed to be the age of technology and enlightenment and human progress and becoming and all those kinds of things. And without a doubt, there was a lot of technological advances and that kind of thing. But how many millions of people were sacrificed on that altar? Let's just look at wars alone.
Mhm.
How many millions of people were sacrificed on that altar? World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, Korea. Millions and millions. People in Christian circles don't like bringing up the philosopher Nietzsche. But as a social critic, standing back and watching something from the outside looking in, it's pretty right on. Got in a lot of trouble for making the statement, God is dead. But if you read what he was talking about, his point was, and you killed him with your intellectualism. I think he was making the point. Obviously, don't know him, never had a conversation with him, but read a lot of his books. I think what he was saying was God speaks in the language of metaphor. Human experience, all of it, joy, sadness, heartbreak, loss, like all these things. And you can't intellectualize your way out of these things. They have to be experienced. That's why things like a requiem, the the funeral oratory, the dirge, these kind of things, they're so powerful because it brings us into a place not only experiencing the suffering of somebody who is lost that we're reading about or we're watching, but it connects with our sense of loss, the things that we have lost, and it connects us to it. And I think myth, if you look at it, parable story, brings us to a place where we can actually come face to face with our experiences. Because there's no space to come face to face with our experiences in a analytical, statistical driven, data point use mindset. It can't purely be that. There's a time and a place for it. Of course there is. But we've lost our hearts.
So, is the ability to think in metaphor and make inference from metaphor, is that an innate human ability?
Mm,
Um, I, I can think of one individual who naturally thinks in these methods and then drives a whole bunch of people crazy because they can't translate that into anything meaningful.
mm,
Um, they're just completely lost. And and yeah, so I'm curious about that.
mm, mm. Yep, there has to be. Well, the thing that strikes me when you ask that question or when you bring up that point is that metaphor, story, thinking in those modes, like, is incredibly humble by the definition of that we've used already, like the desire to learn. Because it's an exploration, it's a curiosity. Like, I see this working this way in these places in our world, and I wonder if it applies across the board. There's not a I know that that applies across the board. It's like I wonder, or I wonder if the whole goal of the analytical and the statistical is to know, is the pursuit of knowing that one day I will reach this place where I know everything. And I think it's flawed on a very fundamental level for that fact alone, that there's one day I will know everything. The infiniteness of experience just precludes that. 7 to 8 billion people, all having very unique circumstances, very unique experiences in very unique locations. That's a lot of experiential knowledge. There's no way you're going to know that. It's not possible. It's flawed from the very beginning.
But I think for these people in particular, there's some kind of sense of, I don't know how to describe this, emoting the future in some sense. Like it's a, I have this, I don't know how to describe it. It's like I've seen something kind of like this elsewhere, and it might be completely in an unrelated field. So there's some kind of artistic expression, and this thing over here reminds me kind of like that, but it doesn't really exist. So I can't put words exactly onto what that really looks like. I just believe that I almost get this sense of here again, using metaphor to describe it. Like peering into the fog, and it's like I see this shadowy outline, and I think it might be something, and then the critics are standing by there and be like, well, you can't see what it is. Tell me what it is. Well, like, let's deal with it or whatever. And it's like, or let's build it or let's whatever needs to happen. And it's like, well, I can't.
Yeah, I can't build a bridge to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's this possibility too, right? Of using story and metaphor and analogy and intuition and felt sense and that kind of stuff in order to make you feel safe as well.
Explain that.
Right. So how does that
No,
happen?
no,
I've got
but
this.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Explain what you mean by that. But by
Yeah. So I could, in my experience around very charismatic circles, prophets and teachers and healers and all that kind of stuff, what I have seen happen quite often is you take this intuitive felt sense that is your experience in a moment and you present it as objective truth, and then you start operating according to that objective truth. So you could take that sense and turn it into a certainty. I'm
right.
certain this is going to happen.
Or you can also turn it into safety because if it's an intuitive felt sense, you do free yourself from criticism. Like there isn't an objective way to measure that,
There
really.
isn't. There isn't. Like, one example pops into mind right around the time of the not this last election, but the previous election. There was all sorts of disruption in from these circles about that Trump actually won, and that Biden had cheated and da da da. And there was a lot of cultural chaos going on at that time. And I saw multiple people make prophecies that God allowed this, and then He was going to come and restore Trump to the presidency, and how the forces of evil were operating against, and I don't know what the interplay was along those lines at all. I don't pretend to know,
Sure.
and I won't even make a guess. But I heard all sorts of prophecies that within the year he will be returned to the presidency, and the false prophet will be thrown down, and all that kind of stuff. I saw multiple people in that vein saying those things. What what happened? That's not what happened. But you had this prophecy. Okay, what happened? Were you not just scared because of what had transpired? Whatever you thought that was, whether if the election was stolen or whatever the case may be, were you not just scared and justifying or soothing your fears via this mythology that you created?
Mm. Is there a narrative of a whatever you want to call it, Christian nation or I mean, it can go as broad as that. It could go as much as, God's spokesperson individually. Like, is there a narrative to protect with this?
Yeah. And I would have no problem if those people had said, no, that was the narrative I was creating, and it didn't happen, and I own that. No problem with that whatsoever. Didn't hear that at all. Didn't hear a peep of it. Okay. Okay. I think mythology is powerful in that, even in a situation like that, there is a lesson to learn if you're open to the lesson.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
But that lesson, the best lessons are extracted not through, I mean, there's a reason why literature is best studied in groups. There's a reason, in my opinion, why I would far rather spend time in a Bible study in conversation with other people, engaging around the lessons of this than
Mhm.
individually. Like, I feel like, I mean, certainly there's value in cultivating an individual cultivating their personal walk with God, whatever that looks like, union with God, whatever that is. But we in the Western world have so individualized it. And
Yeah,
when you're looking at mythology, when you're looking at stories like this, isn't it far more powerful to have conversation around it so that
yeah,
we can really plumb the depths?
right. Well, on the very level of we were designed for we were designed for union, we were designed for community, we were designed to learn from each other, to grow, to all everything that goes along with that. But in this individualistic society, what happens is there becomes this competitive thing that's going on. There becomes this comparison, this ranking system, even within Bible studies. Oh, who knows the most about the Bible? You're like, who cares? It's about about your personal experience, your interaction with this. The Not to go too far afield, but I saw this video and it was talking about the law of observation. And within quantum mechanics, what they have found is that particles act differently when they're observed. Wow, that's weird. And they use this example of waves. And light travels in waves, and it also travels as photons, as packets of energy, essentially. When it's unobserved, it travels as a wave. But when it's observed, it starts acting like a photon, like a packet of energy rather than a wave. And so and I'm way oversimplifying this, but the idea is that things are interacted differently when they're being observed.
Mhm.
Human beings operate differently when they're being observed.
Well, and you can there's actually a book you might also throw up in your mouth on this one. It's actually a fascinating it's a fascinating book on getting things done. It's called The Four Disciplines of Execution. But their observation is that humans perform differently when when two traits are present. Number one, there's a score, and number two, they're being watched.
Yeah,
And like that's the difference between shooting hoops like and a basketball game.
in your driveway versus, 20,000 people watching you.
Yeah, exactly. And the more you want to the more you want to amp up the pressure, the just grow the audience and grow the visibility. And
Right, right. And I think it's interesting because I saw this correlation in my head, and this may just be in my head, but I'm curious about it. When I engage with scripture and I truly engage with it and I'm observing it, does it start to come alive? Rather than an intellectual pursuit, rather than the utility of it, am I observing and asking questions and engaging with it? Does it come alive in a different way? For me, it has. For the longest time, it was a self-help manual. I had a problem, I went to it to solve a problem, and then, it was constantly problem solving. But as I started to sit with it and observe it and ask questions of it and ask questions in community, in the we, in union, it started to come alive more and more. And I wonder if our individual, intellectual, competitive, scorekeeping pursuits kill that curiosity. And so it
there's
dies because it's really being unobserved at that point. The person's being unobserved, the word is being unobserved. There's just this death that happens around this utility rather than engagement.
there's so many threads to this. Um, Sometimes the observation that we're experiencing isn't actually even a real person. Sometimes it's the opinions and thoughts of people around us who've, if you grow up in a lifetime of, this is not everybody's experience, but if you grow up in a lifetime of having been observed and measured, and you have to die to that voice that keeps talking in your head, the phantom
Yeah.
reality. Um,
The perfectionism standard. By whatever view of perfection was presented to you in your formative years. That's the hardest part for me. Can I allow that voice to die when for so long I believed that that's what was keeping me alive was that voice. I had to follow it.
Well, and there's another intriguing question by which, and I'm curious to hear your experience of this. How does that die? And I think for myself, the death for me happens when I'm in impossible situations. And I really have two choices. It's either, I mean, I don't think dying is, um, even from a physical standpoint, even when you have somebody who's ready to to transition, who's they love Jesus, they've got eternal confidence and faith, even seeing even seeing visions of angels or Jesus or things like that. There's still this really painful process of the body letting go.
Yeah.
and and the body is built to hang on, it's built for life. And I think we have to understand that our own death is very similar, that death to ourselves, or our own death, is going to just, it can be very noisy and very messy. And I
Yeah.
think the questions I've forced myself, I have had to do, it's basically like, when the death happens, am I going to flail and destroy everybody in my path, or which is it's the easy reactive thing to do, or am I going to take the opportunity to, I mean, really, I don't know any way to describe it besides just fall on Christ and and throw myself on him so that my flailing doesn't hurt the people around me.
Right.
And he's so willing and ready to be present in our flailing as that death happens. And that's really the safest place for ourselves. And it's really the safest place for the people around us. Um, and certainly where there are people, um, there can be people around us, but we are still the ones who have to do the dying.
Right. Right. Yeah. What I hear you talking about is the sacrament of suffering, a tangible, real world felt experience of suffering here that ties us to Jesus, ties us to the eternal. And if we choose that, if that sacrament of suffering is a destination rather than a doorway, we're either going to avoid that doorway with everything we are, or we're going to approach it and we're just going to stand in it. And probably depending on your relationship to suffering throughout your life, how suffering was handled, if it was to fix it or to medicate it or to get rid of it or to ignore it, whatever methodology, or it was to learn from whatever it is determines which way you're going to go. So the preconceived notion about suffering determines how you're going to handle it. And if it was anything other than to learn from it and to experience it and to allow Jesus to hold you in it, then something is going to have to die in that moment. Something's going to have to die. So, like you said, the tough situations, my narrative breaks down, those voices break down in the really tough situations.
Right.
Right. And I think you, at some point, mythologically and in real world, you come to the end of your knowing. It's like Alexander the Great. There's the poet writes like he wept when he came to the edge of the world because there was no more territory to conquer. That's very mythological. All of us come to that point where there is no more territory to conquer. The voices in our head, which have been guiding us the entirety of our lives, no longer function well. What do you do at that point? I mean, there's a million and one different responses to that.
I think you pitched Napoleon on some kind of sales pitch on going to the moon or something.
You're right.
Let's monetize narcissism.
You got to do something, right?
Yeah, you do.
You got to do something. So I find a new territory to conquer, something obscene, something outlandish.
Right.
Let's colonize Mars. Okay, okay.
But it's possible. And again, it's possible that those actions aren't driven by those motivations of having hit your limits. It's possible that those explorations can be fueled by curiosity, by
Yes,
the desire to help humanity in some form or fashion, whether you agree with it or not. Um,
right,
but they can also be fueled by this deep drive to I don't want to come face to face with the reality of my limitations.
right. Yeah, I don't want to die.
I don't want to die.
Yeah. There's this character. Have you ever seen the show Parks and Rec?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So there's this character, Rob Lowe plays the character, and he is this eternally like upbeat, happy guy. Even when he's going through massive like suffering, he'll say like, "I am suffering terribly right now," but it's in the most chipper, cheerful way. And you're like, what is going on? And in one of the episodes, he looks at me and they're like, why do you take so many supplements? I guess he's got like B vitamin injections and supplements and like he's always got this and he runs to work, all the stuff. And he goes, because I'm going to live to be 150 years old. And there's no like hint of like he's not serious. Like he's dead serious. I'm going to live forever. And you're like, yeah, maybe that is the longing inside us
Yeah,
to live forever, but we just mistake it for physically live forever.
right.
There is an entire we talked about the bridal industry before we got on, we started recording. Like, think about the self-perfection industry,
Yes.
whether it's plastic surgery or it's supplements or it's treatments or whatever the case may be. I'm going to live forever.
Well, and there's the other elements of like, okay, I mean, there's so many versions of this, secular, Christian, whatever, of legacy, and legacy is about living forever. So, and then there's ways to soothe the ache of not getting everything done in your lifetime that you want to, which is you can spiritualize it, which is saying, well, God has a legacy for family lines, so you don't have to freak out. Like you will live forever through your kids and your grandkids. Um, And if not biological, then, there's so many ways to create this concept of a life that will continue beyond you. It's why people put their names on buildings. It's why people start foundations. It's why people try to find, world-changing inventions and win the Nobel Prize and do other types of things like that so that they can leave some kind of thing and won't be forgotten. Even though, statistically speaking, the odds of really truly going down in history as as a universal, nearly universal figure who will be remembered for hundreds or thousands of years.
It's
That's
pretty rare.
pretty rare. I mean, just look at the percentage of the people in the world who under just to pick one example, what percentage of the world truly understands who Martin Luther was, even though he's famous to a large segment of the population. There's a large segment of the population who isn't, or for whom he isn't, and that's just one example of
Right.
many who, by some definition, are and genuinely should be well known,
Yeah.
respected for their impact that they had on the world.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah. The person who is remembered by everybody for, you know, history is really the iconoclast, is the one who saw something in a system and was like, there's something off here. I'm going to do something about it. And fascinating thing is those who buck the trend, those who everybody's going left, they go right, that kind of thing. Those are the type of people who really, really are remembered for good and for bad, depending on how you view their lives. Um, there is really this desire to be remembered and almost a self-assuredness of I'm right. Like and no matter who is in my way, like you could see that as like Alexander the Great. People, the average person knows who that is. I mean, previously in our educated society, everybody would know who that was.
Yep.
Steve Jobs, those type of people, like they decide, no, I'm going to do it this way, and I am going to take whatever pain comes to create my legacy.
But there's also it goes beyond just that because it's not just that. It's also well, okay, first of all, my observation of that is that for every one of those who becomes well known, there's I don't know how many nines there are, but there's 999 or 99,999 people who are just straight up forgotten. Um,
Yeah.
it failed like miserably, not just I mean, sure, there are people who are average there, but many times that comes with failing spectacularly. Um,
Right.
and and then the other observation is that it's not just bucking the trend. It's there's also a level of marketing that comes with that because there are a lot of people who do buck the trend in some capacity, but they do it in such a covert way so as not to be remembered.
Right.
And and so I think there's cases where the marketing is done intentionally by themselves. I think it's I mean, there's a reason why Steve Jobs was the keynote speaker for the Apple announcements. Um,
Right.
uh, but there's other times when the marketing is done by other people.
Right. Well, you look at it too, like there, it's very mythological. Like it's very Icarus. You fly too close to the sun, your wings melt, and you crash down to the earth.
Right.
Like Steve Jobs, yes, he built this company. He was Apple,
Yeah.
and yet when it came time to recognize his humanity, he refused to. He refused to believe that he had cancer or that it was going to kill him. Okay. Alexander the Great, he expands this territory at the cost of keeping his men away from their families for years and years and years and years, and his men end up killing him because they saw he was never going to stop. Like he flew too close to the sun. Like there is this tragic story.
Well, I think a lot of these people would admit that they've the level of risk, how like a lot of it does seem to come down to how closely can you fly to the sun? How
Mhm.
much risk can you take? You have to go right up to the absolute possible edge, but you dare not drop off the edge.
Right, right.
And that's a lot of mental angst and physical angst to live with on an ongoing
Yeah.
basis.
And a person in that position can even be aware of that fact, but the pull of the ego is so strong that the vision of what is the edge and what is not the edge gets really clouded,
Hmm.
really clouded.
Well, the
There's
problem,
this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, just a quick note on like Alexander the Great. The problem is that you have this positive reinforcement up until the edge. Like you've survived this far, and the further you go, it feeds the ego and the confidence because I mean, you have data that
Yeah,
supports that you're invincible.
right, right. Yeah, there's this show, I think it's on Apple TV called 100 Foot Wave. And it shows the surfers that come to this place in Portugal where during a certain season they get these massive waves. And in the most recent season, there's this big wave rider who is famous and who has done this 100 times. And he's riding 1 foot wave, one mistake, he dies.
Wow.
Dies. It is dangerous. It is so dangerous. I mean, it's essentially crashing pretty much on a cliff. So you have to ride and get out at the right time. Otherwise, like you're done. And like that's the reality of it. And like how far can you push that edge before it bites back?
Well, there's a level of uh, okay, more from things I've heard, not from experience, but there's a level of I've experienced it in some fashion. There's trail running that I've done that's where it's like you really have to be on your game so you don't roll or break an ankle.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's something really I don't know what you call it, euphoric, meditative. I don't even know what the right you can probably find a better word for it, but the hyper focus that you get in a situation like that is something that's a really incredible experience
Yeah. It sounds like
and
a flow state.
a flow state.
Yeah.
And there's a lot I've heard from many different directions in extreme sports that that's a lot of what it's a lot of what they're chasing is is that flow state.
Yeah. I know when I run, 75% of the time it's a duty. It's a slog. It's an effort. But there is that 25% of the time, especially for me when it's raining and I'm out running, like it is just a flow state and I feel like I could just go forever. You find that rhythm and you're in it and you do chase it. Like it's like chasing the eternal. Like, oh, this is a small piece. It's a sacrament. This is a small piece of what heaven is going to feel like. What it feels like to, shed this mortal coil
Right.
and to be in that flow state. And it is addicting. Talk to any runner. Like I'm certainly not on that level, but they run ultra marathons. They just run, that's just what they do. There's a flow state that they get into, and it's addicting. Like if you could live in that flow state, oh man. The closest thing I can compare it to is when I had knee surgery a number of years ago, early to 2000s, and they in the pre-op they gave me some sort of sedative to like prepare me for the surgery. In that moment, it felt free.
Mm.
Like it felt like there were no problems in the world, and like everything was great. And like I get why people get addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
That feeling, like I haven't experienced that feeling anywhere else. But like that feeling running, they call it the runner's high or whatever you get in that flow state. Okay. Um, Pre-op to surgery, which strangely enough, running caused me to need the surgery, but but like there's something there that I very rarely experienced in this life. And maybe that's the mythology. Maybe that's what we're talking about. All these endeavors, we're chasing this flow state. We're chasing
Well,
this experience.
there's something about flow state that lets you put your blinders on. Like the rest of the world disappears and it's just you and whatever it is. And I mean, there is a little bit of of an eternal hint with God wiping away the tears, like the worries being gone. Like there's this sense in which all these things that haunt us in our lived experience here will be gone. They won't be in our peripheral vision. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so jumping back a little bit to the conversation of prophecy and mythology and scripture. So most the way mythology was ever described was, you know, described to me, taught to me, approached, it's you can never say any of the Bible is mythological because the scripture is inspired and true. And um, but parables by your definition or by your are mythological in nature. Um,
Hmm.
and and I think the question then becomes wherein do we what well there's a whole question of that of understanding the relationship of mythology and scripture. The other question that I'm curious about, and you can just pick whichever road you want to go down. I am very fascinated by what you're saying about the metaphorical language of the general charismatic culture and the concept of prophecy. And it's striking to me from that conversation that there are some people who are leaning heavily and almost exclusively on metaphorical language with very few, you can make an argument, very little grounding in objective facts and reality outside of that.
Yeah,
And we also see people who are only grounded in objective facts and reality and completely abandon, you know, metaphorical language and intuition and felt sense. And a lot of those would end up being, I mean, that's typically where you find, at least in religious contexts, your more fundamentalist types of groups of people. So I'm also very curious about how you see both the intuitive felt sense metaphorical language and the analytical objective data driven pieces fitting into in
yeah.
into our approach to the world and with God.
Yeah. Well, I've seen something interesting in people I've talked to, people I've worked with. Um, it's an interesting trend. People who are raised in more charismatic traditions and had some sort of experience with that, their their response to that is typically to go hardcore analytical. I can think of 5 examples right now who are raised in in more of a Pentecostal charismatic church, who now are just really solidly Calvinist.
Hmm.
And I've seen people who were raised really solidly Calvinist, Baptist, whatever the case may be, who their response was to go more charismatic, more Pentecostal. And in that, I think there's something very, very interesting. Because you can't say one's wholly good and one's wholly bad. Can't.
Right.
But what I think we can say is that it's an attempt to seek balance.
Yeah.
And maybe we got hardcore one viewpoint and we started to experience something around there that wasn't true, came to the edge of our understanding, or we had questions people couldn't answer.
Right.
And we could blame the people who were supposed to be giving the answers, the pastors, the leaders, the whatever. Okay. You know, maybe not. I don't know the individual situation, but what we do know is that you reach the extent of your knowledge at that point. And so you went searching for understanding another place. And I wonder if over the course of life, we don't all have these diversions back and forth in a seeking of balance. That's how I approach it. Like it's a seeking of balance because this is really, really stimulating to the mind and to the analytical, and this is really, really stimulating to the spirit, to the heart. Okay. But we are integrated beings and we have to have a balance there.
Right.
That's the first thing for me. And in charismatic circles, what I've seen more often than not is people chasing a feeling, chasing a flow state. It seems to me that in my experience with working with people in this area, that there's been something really, really painful that hasn't been able to be addressed by these other ways. So I go super mystical in trying to address it. And it's an avoidance, or it's a chasing of a feeling and an avoidance of a feeling.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so I get really, really leery around um, prophets and healers and that kind of thing when their prophecies and their words of knowledge and that kind of thing seem to be 99% uh, empowerment, um, prosperity, um, encouragement, like these kinds of things. Because when I look at scripture, the prophecies that I read about, the prophets that I hear speaking, 98% of the time they're speaking warning and woe. And 2% of the time they're giving encouragement in really difficult situations.
So I've got,
I don't hear today's prophets speaking like those prophets.
and I've got a question for that because how much of that is because that is literally I mean, how, how much of that is because and maybe this is literally the distribution, the 98 2% that, 98% 2% that should be the balance. How much of that is because prophets were predominantly sent to people of power who refused to listen to anybody else, and the prophet was the one who was willing to speak on God's behalf and willing to risk his life and either look stupid or be killed or whatever the
Yeah.
consequences would be. Um, and as we see in the story of Jonah, like that was the big battle. Like, are you willing to surrender your ego to deliver the message? Like that's fundamentally it. And the prophets did go to the broken and downtrodden. Jesus himself in the Beatitudes addressed them and said, "Good news for you." But even he was confronting their beliefs. Their beliefs were, "I'm so broken and so downtrodden that nobody can save me. I'm beyond hope and nobody." But he's like, "No, there actually is hope." And so
Yeah.
if you look at the fundamental structure of any kind of prophetic nature, like it seems to me, and not having studied it, not having, this is just inferences, but it seems to me like much of the role of the prophet was to provide God's perspective on a situation that was outside of the person's current frame of mind.
Right. Right. And I could be wrong about this. Again, we're not experts. We're just two guys being curious about stuff here. I don't see God picking people up and taking them out of situation. I get him delivering messages and saying, I am with you. That's the hope. I am with you.
Yeah. Well, hope, the possibility of change. Man, you're probably aware of this in in your work, but the high that you get from alcohol, from the relief that you get from alcohol is actually not from the drink; it's from the decision to drink. Um,
Yes.
and in the same way, the emotional hit that you get when you're in the middle of a situation is not from being delivered; it's from the promise of deliverance.
Mm,
Um,
right.
and that's a really powerful thing when it's grounded in truth, but it can be incredibly delusional. And there's a lot of people who've deconstructed and sometimes walked away from the faith because they were given hope and a promise and they latched onto it. They experienced an emotional hit and reality didn't actually line up with that.
Right.
And that's a really difficult question then when somebody's speaking on behalf of God.
Right.
And the message is God will take you out of this situation, and it doesn't happen. And
Right.
and then what?
Right. Right. I think that's the most holy and sacred time. Because in that moment, and we've all done it. I've done it. We've all let our hopes and our dreams and our desires to be rid of something like lead us into fantasy of he's going to pick us up and pull us out of this. We've all done it. Like if you sit across me and tell me you haven't done it, then conversation over because we have, all of us.
Yeah.
And you can put religious language on it, you can put secular language on it, it doesn't matter. We've all done it because it's painful and we don't like the pain and we want to be freed from it. Very understandable. Very understandable. And I think it's the grace of God that when those things get shown to be not real, that He's with us. And that's where the true learning happens. That's where the humbling happens. That's where the character formation happens. But if we cannot accept that, if we cannot accept that it was us and not Him, then we're going to get stuck in this infinite loop of asking for God for things and Him either giving it to us or not giving it to us, depending on our perception, and it just becomes this feedback loop.
Which, oh man, um, and with confirmation bias, we'll take the few times where he did answer the prayers, and we're like, see, I had faith in that moment. And all the
Right,
times when we don't see that, it was like, well, I didn't have faith. I must have done something wrong. I must not have. I needed a fresh something to so that my prayers can get answered because um, there's this fascinating thing concept with what you described too, with this back and forth between, from truth to truth, denomination to denomination, whatever it is, that Richard Koch in his book, The Natural Laws of Business, talks about the idea that that a missile okay when you're I believe that's where this concept where I stumbled on this concept, but the idea is if you're reaching for something beside your bed and you don't know where it is, it's dark, you have a broad sweeping motion and then you accidentally hit it and you narrow your motion and you're like, oh, there it is, got it. Same thing that 99% of the time that a target seeking missile is in the air, it's off course by
Right.
design. So
Yeah.
ooh, we're going this way. Ooh, back. Ooh, ooh. Like it's not even possible just because of all the variances. Like perhaps I mean, if you had a perfectly controlled environment, which is an insane idea. No,
Yeah.
no, you can control the wind, you can control, I don't know, everything.
Yeah.
Who knows? You wouldn't have to do that. You could, well, and you had computational methods that could calculate with the level of precision that you needed to, because that takes an incredible amount of precision to set and maybe even with that, I don't know, maybe even with atomic alignment, like it's not possible to do. Who knows? In a theoretical world, potentially, but we're not in a theoretical world. We're in a pragmatic world. And so you're going to get thrown off course. You're going to get thrown this way. Um, the third picture of this is I think Chesterton talks about this in Orthodoxy, but the idea of church as a rock that's it's about to fall. It looks very perilous and it's about to fall this way, and the whole thing is about to be capsized, and all of a sudden it falls over on this side, and it's
Mhm.
perilous. It's unpredictable, but somehow it manages to stay upright despite all of humanity's imperfections and whims and
Right.
all the weird things that happen.
Right. Right. Yeah. Just the unpredictability. Yeah. I mean, like to live in an environment where you absolutely know that chaos will happen. To solve that problem, like you have to recognize that chaos is going to happen. It will happen. And
And
if all of my theology is based around preventing chaos from happening, it's a poisoned theology. And it's gonna end up hurting people.
well, there's so many layers to this. It's like you're not going to have an on day every day. You're going to succumb to temptation. You're going to talk about that can be seem very fatalistic to certain streams of thought. Um, but the point is
If the
not
goal is perfection.
if the goal is perfection, but if the goal is union. I mean, it's like if you really understand that we are on a journey with a destination that we're not expected to arrive at, just move towards,
Yeah,
then you can give yourself grace to get up the next day and to move again.
right. And what if you take that outside of the personal and let's expand it a little bit wider and let's take it to the cultural.
Hmm.
Like look at the winding route the Jewish people have taken throughout history. No matter your feelings on right, wrong, good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, let's just put all of that on the shelf for a second. Look at the route the Jewish people have taken throughout history. That is a circuitous, exhausting, up and down, everywhere across the globe type of route. Now, if you us sitting here looking back over the history, we can acknowledge, wow, that is a journey. But imagine being yourself in that community, experiencing those things. What are you going to feel? Are you going to have the eyesight to be able to say, we're on this circuitous journey as a human being? That's going to be really, really hard. 5,000 years of human history recorded, and we've always been wandering. No wonder they would want to hold on to this homeland. I want a home.
Mhm.
And we're not saying right, wrong, who's at fault, like I'm not even addressing that. That is not what we talk about here. What I'm just talking about is the lived experience of being within that community. Of course, there's going to be a longing for home.
Yeah.
Of course, there is. And look at the Arab people going all the way back to the Abraham story, being cast out in the desert and all that kind of stuff. Look at their wandering. Of course, they're going to want a home. Of course. And they're going to want a home that is isolated and protected from the outside world because what they have experienced from the outside world.
It's the outside world has not exactly been friendly to them, either of them.
Yeah, right. Of course.
That's fascinating. And oh wow. And I mean, that's also a challenge to us as individuals, to us as churches, as in a church context, that when we face, particularly in a church context, when we face opposition and persecution, that we don't become insular in
Right.
response. And that's a challenge.
Right.
One of the things that I've also thought a lot about is that it seems to me that much of life is about navigating forces, uncontrollable forces, forces of nature. That if we were to view cultural trends less as, and maybe I'm just completely bonkers on this idea, but um, it seems like there's such a thought around the idea that we can control the cultural narrative and line of thinking. And and sure, maybe there are things we can do to influence it. I don't know. But maybe there's also something also interesting happens when you surrender and you recognize it as, in some sense, an uncontrollable force of nature. The wind blows where it will, the water moves where it will. Like, don't build your house on some kind of place where you know you're going to get, you know,
On a floodplain.
well, in a floodplain. There you go. Perfect. Exactly. Like, don't do that. And then
Yes.
just pray it doesn't, rain. Like, and
Which
so
is
it
such
seems,
a vastly curious thing. Like when you have set your home up on a floodplain, you pray that there won't be rain. And around the world in the desert of Ethiopia, they're praying it will rain.
right. Well, if God were running a democracy, how many people are in the desert praying for rain?
Right.
Sorry, dude, you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, right? And I think about like human nature, and the nation of Israel, the Jewish people and the Arab people and like them looking for a home. And I think about denominations.
Hmm.
Like they're looking for a home. They feel unsafe in a world that is unpredictable. And this group of people sees the world in this way, and that makes me feel safe.
Well, how much of the formation of denominations comes from some form of threat response?
You're asking a dangerous question,
Well,
but it's kind of what we do with curious questions. Well, I'll go one step further. By that understanding of human nature, is the LGBTQ group a denomination?
hmm,
I'm just looking for a home. I feel unsafe in this world. And again, we're not saying right, wrong, good, bad, healthy, unhealthy. We're putting all of that stuff on the shelf. We're just saying, like, as a human being,
yeah,
is that not a denomination?
yeah.
Is it any different than, I'm probably going to get myself in trouble for saying this, but who cares? Is it any different than the Baptists or the Calvinists or the Charismatics or the?
What I think it's very easy to see from the gospel, from scripture, that any home that we make for ourselves that is not union with Christ, with God, Him as the dwelling place, is some form of idolatry. And the sense of home that we should experience in any kind of community gathering, anything like that, should be based on that. And only insofar. And I think some of the challenge, especially in religious contexts, is that it can start with that, but it takes a very perceptive person to recognize when it's drifted from that. And
Right.
that sense of belonging and home just happens because you have all these friendships that you've
Right.
accumulated over the years. And now that's why it feels like home.
Right. And it gets really insular, right? Really isolated, really us against the world, really bubble-esque, right?
Yeah.
And then like you look at it, like it becomes very insular. We create these utopias where this is our haven from the rest of the world. But it also cuts you off from any sort of dissenting opinion, which could move you forward.
Right.
And so you get really increasingly more internal and insular. It's like the royal families in Europe to maintain the royal bloodline. They intermarry all within this. Okay. Now we start to have some issues that pop up when you become insular. Or utopia communities where you become very insular, very isolated from the world, very separated, and you all intermarry, and there's some issues that come up from being too insular.
There's also issues that come up from not being insular.
Mm.
Mm. What do you do when you've got somebody marrying into the royal bloodline who doesn't share the values of the royal bloodline, who
Ooh.
stands up to the system? Um,
Right.
like that's a really from a
What if
distance.
you
Go
what
ahead.
if you have somebody within an insular community who is having a really rough time
Yeah.
and is not getting the help that they need? And so they look outside of the insular system for help, and they're receiving help. But how does the insular community respond to that person?
Yeah. That's
Jesus will forget the 99 and go after the one. They're the one we have to go after.
yeah, they are. I think fundamentally the issue is that either way you fall into the trap of believing the lie that there's a problem-free life somewhere. Which,
Right.
if you want to go back, let's talk mythology one more time. If you want to go back to the garden, like, isn't that part of the like e- in a perfect world, the serpent was able to point out the flaw, the whatever you want, the perceived
In a
flaw
perfect world.
in a perfect world, right? With the
Yeah.
promise of a perfect world. And
Right.
to this day, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in religion, church, commerce, consumerism, whatever, we're so susceptible relationships, the bridal industry, I don't know, whatever, everything we've talked about. We are so susceptible to this idea that there is a perfect problem-free life out there somewhere.
Yes.
And the faster you can break your the illusion of that and the delusion of that, and actually accept the fact that you're just going to have problems. Like
Yeah.
it's just going to be it. And would you rather have the problem that comes with being insular and, inbred and all this stuff that comes, whatever you want to call it, however you want to say it,
Yeah.
or
Incestuous.
exactly, or do you want the problems that come from having dissenting voices and uncomfortable people and people you can't control and a chaotic situation and trust that in some form or fashion we have our sights set on truth and that we're going to self-correct along the way and by God's grace we're going to arrive where we need to when we need to.
Yeah. Go read East of Eden. Like if you're wrestling with these ideas of what it means to be part of a community, what it means to insulate, what it means to perfect, what it means to be eternally searching for this Eden experience, go read East of Eden. Steinbeck is a master of writing about this. He writes the story so well. And the beautiful thing is, somewhere three-quarters of the way through the book, there's a servant. He's a Chinese guy, and he gives this monologue, and it's about 10 pages long, and it just essentially summarizes what we just said. It doesn't exist. The perfect doesn't exist. There will be chaos. Can you live in the chaos and trust? Isn't that what the illustration or not a parable, the story of Jesus on the boat in the lake with the disciples with the storm raging? He doesn't remove them from the lake. And what he says is very curious. Like, oh, you of little faith. I'm here. I'm with you. But we're not safe yet. No, no, I'm here. I'm with you. There's no promise of safety. There's promise of presence. There's promise of union.
Yeah.
That's the reality. We could just figure it out. I'm suspecting that we're not going to.
Yeah. I'm going to suspect the same thing.
And I'm going to suspect that there's going to be prophets. There's going to be iconoclasts. There's going to be people that are standing saying, hey, we're missing the boat here.
Yeah.
And those people will be treated in the way that human beings typically treat those people,
Yeah.
which is we cancel them, we silence them, whatever. And if they still don't shut up, then we kill them. And that's what it's going to be like.
It's kind of depressing to think that I mean it's such a it's been such a recurring pattern in history. Like it's incredibly difficult to argue against. If you're not careful, it can be an incredibly depressing thing to think about.
Yeah. Well, I go back to what Paul said, for the hope of union, he endured the cross.
Yeah.
For the hope of union, not only with God certainly, but with each other, we endure what happens here. And there are moments of heaven where you do experience that union in a friendship, in a marriage, in a with your children, with whatever, with your community, you feel this union and you go, ah, this is the flow state.
This is, yeah.
You were talking about your Thanksgiving off camera, and like when you were talking about that, like it just felt like, ah, this is a
Yeah.
flow state. This was good.
Yeah.
Even though there were sardines present.
Even though there were sardines present. There's a story there.
There is.
Oh, yes. Well, the one last question, I don't know if you have just a couple minutes. The one last question I
Yeah.
had with this whole conversation is in the shift from, Calvinist Baptist to, charismatic or vice versa, how would you describe the whole integrated person on the end of that journey? What does that look like?
I have to use my imagination. I really think it looks like a humble person, just with the desire to learn. And every person I come into contact with has something to teach me. I don't feel like I think that person has been through the fights and has recognized how useless they are.
Mhm.
And I recognize, or I think it's something like Jesus when the rich young ruler comes up to him and he says, sell everything, give it to the poor and follow me. Like, it just looks like somebody whose only concern is what is Jesus saying and doing now? And that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very humble position. It's a very desire to learn position. It's a very meek position. And I think that person metaphorically has a sword, knows how to use it, but keeps it sheathed until it's time. I think that
Yeah.
that's what that person looks like.
And pragmatically, it's a place of coming to peace in some way of the good and the not good, and wherever they started their journey, recognizing the good and the not good, and wherever they are at in the moment or wherever they've walked through, and being willing to assimilate the good that is there, being willing to forgive the things that aren't good in those spaces, and then be open to recognize that they don't have the whole picture.
And being open to being you in front of somebody. And if they choose to walk away, they walk away.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
holding on too tightly to anything aside from union.
yeah. And recognizing that for a significant number of people, that whole idea is scary.
Right. Yeah, it's their Mount Everest.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Have you had? I just gotta shut this down. But anyway, I'm gonna ask a question anyway. Have you ever had people like just um, you've had that experience where people are like that Kevin guy? He's too. Uh, I don't know. I'm too afraid of what he's going to see in me that I'm going to avoid him. Like just
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been afraid
yeah.
in that way as well. Certain people of like, they see pretty clearly. And maybe I'm not ready for what they see.
Let's
So yeah, yes.
you
Short
guys
answer,
stay
yes.
you guys stay over there.
Yeah.
Fun. Let's create an insular system because it's better for me.
It's just easier that way. I can
Just
sit in
use
my office with my books and my dog,
exactly.
and yeah, it's just safer.
Exactly. Exactly. They're known problems.
And then my dog yells at me like, "Dude, we need to go outside.
Like, ah,
I want to go to the
fine.
park."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Wonderful. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We've covered a lot of really interesting terrain, stories,
Yeah.
starting with stories and the impact of story, and really ending up with, oh man, how stories unfold in people's lives and how we make sense of it. And it's quite wonderful. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
And for all of you guys listening, I thought about this recently. Why do I always like, I always say this at the end as if like I fully expect people to go the whole time and just follow along and be like, man, I really want to hear that last comment that Matthias drops at the end. It's like, man, that
It's
was a zinger. Like
it's
he
our
told me
narcissism, right?
exactly.
We're certain that because we're here for an hour and a half, like you're gonna be here to the end.
Obviously. I mean, obviously. I can't imagine. I mean, nobody has anything else to do with their life. They should be listening to this. Um, So anyway, nonetheless, if you made it this far, I think you should just give yourself a high five. You're probably already subscribed. You're probably already following us somewhere. So there's really no need to tell you any of that. We would love we do love hearing from you guys and engaging in the conversation. Like we've said many times, we're curious people. We try to be mindful of our own limitations and our lack of expertise, but also recognizing that we do have a perspective from our lived experiences. So we would love to hear yours. That's my point with that, because that brings a fullness to the picture. So thank you for if you made it this far. hats off to you. We're we
Well
count it a
done.
privilege for you to join our conversation. And until next time,
Until next time.
thanks, Kevin.